It'll be interesting to see. It's really
So that's the streaming streamer. That's pretty cool. And the presenter will go up to the podium. I like that. So it's HDMI 4.
Maybe I should start.
I don't know patterns that you get too far. What's a good decision for that? I just had good coworkers.
And it's hard.
I can replicate that. So yeah.
You're going first. Change it to input. I don't know what it is. I'll put it on the remote. And then that's it.
It's okay, I'm not gonna start talking for a while. You're looking at it.
Alright. Well, what's up, everybody? It's a lot smaller group than last time. I think summer caught up to everybody and wanted to be outside or on vacation or something, but you know, I know last year we kind of took a hiatus over the summertime and want to make sure we didn't do that this year for anyone who did want to get together. I like having these little reprieves every month, so today should actually be pretty fun. We are going to try to do our very first live streaming. We're going to see how that works. Brandon was kind enough to lend us his computer since we're going to be presenting and that wasn't really going to work, so we'll see how this goes.
Are you already live?
Not yet.
Yeah, we are.
Are we?
Oh, okay.
Well, we'll see if anyone's watching. Hey. But I think this could actually be a thing. I've had a few people on Slack and just at meetups come and say, you know, I can't make it. Want to, you know, can you live stream it so I can watch it from home or with their phone or whatever. So hopefully this works out well and we can start doing it. But yeah, I don't know. Tweet it, spread the word, 2-page, subscribe. Get up to that like 100 subscriber number, that'd be awesome. So today is all about refactoring, and we kind of got a wide range. Chris is gonna grit through the pain and wow us with some CSS magic. Paul is gonna do something on automated refactoring, so you don't even have to worry about, you know, using your fingers or anything like that, which should be awesome. Unfortunately, Kyle Rose couldn't make it tonight. He just started a new job, so he was kind of grinding on that. But I'm sure he'll be speaking again soon. He's always got a lot of great stuff to go over and show us. So, and then, oh yeah, Cody. Cody's going to be doing a talk on upgrading Babel 6 to Babel 7. I'm going to be doing a brief, hopefully successful live code of transforming just a class component in React to the new hooks. And we are going to start us off with a little bit of a curveball, because Akira is going to be showing refactoring some Ruby. So doing something different, you know, expanding our horizons a little bit. But first, as always, thank you to our sponsors. I don't know if anyone from CBT is here tonight, but they always provide the pizza for us. Super grateful, and Chris and Brandon for hosting us. So yeah, I guess without further ado, we can whip through these and then have some time to socialize at the end. If you haven't got it already, as always, pizza, beer. There's actually a lot of pizza this time since there's so many less people. So grab a couple slices, beer in the fridge, and I think we're ready to roll. Did I miss anything?
Maybe fill-in presentation?
Yes, that's what I was wondering. That's what I forgot. Yeah, so Dustin was gracious enough to offer to do a presentation at the end if we have some extra time. So with a couple people dropping out, and just depending on how this goes, what were you going to do yours on?
It's not even special, it's just a project I'm working on related to audio, tempo, and JavaScript.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, it was kind of a you know, +1 at the end. It's not going to be strictly refactored, but it sounds like a really cool project, matching audio up with
tempo and music and JavaScript. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Yes.
I had one that I pinged Kyle about, refactoring CSS to CSS and JS, the components.
Oh, that's right.
Stuff for time.
Yes, just trying to keep all these straight. Got some. So Are you ready too?
Yeah.
So honestly, with so few of us, tonight's just kind of be a roundtable night. Feel free to ask questions. Not going to be just audience and presenter. We don't have 50 people in here, so this will be a kind of nice change of pace, and let's just kind of have a conversation about refactoring some code.
Cool.
Ready?
Oh,
I'm
hopefully it
ready.
worked great, huh? Do it.
All right.
Alright. Hi guys. Hey, what's up? My name is Akira. So this is my first time to this meetup. This is also my first time ever giving like a technical talk. So thank you for having me. And I figured since you don't know me anyway, if I look like a fool, I can just leave and you'll never see me again. I wanted to just show some basic things about refactoring some Ruby test suites. I consider myself still like a beginner. I've been coding for like maybe a year. And just, a little bit more about me. Whoops, let's go back. Okay. So about me, again, I'm Akira. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I just moved out here. I am a former professional full-time musician. So I worked in opera and sacred music for like 10 years. I got my degree in music and like went all over the world, and it was like super cool. And after again like doing that for 10 years, I just decided I really wanted to change. And the biggest reason is that I felt like I hit this kind of like academic peak almost, and what I could learn with classical. I was like, well, I want more of like an intellectual challenge, but like, what am I gonna do? I like didn't believe in tech. I like hated computers. I didn't own one. I had a flip phone, straight up, and I'm considering going back to the flip phone because I really liked it. But a lot of my friends were like, you should totally try coding. You should like get into programming, like do it. And I was like, okay, whatever. And then I tried it out, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with this. It's like super fun. So from that, I did a little bit of training at the Turing School down in Denver, Colorado, which was like crazy hard and super amazing. I did their back-end program. Unfortunately, I had a lot of health challenges come up, so I put a pause on that, came out here to recover, and here I am. So that's me. So I kind of geared this more toward like more beginners, especially because I didn't know what kind of mix of people came to this group. So this may be all stuff you've heard before. Regardless, there might be some good things that you can pick up just from the back-end side of folks over here in our dungeon. So just some basic good principles that I found when I was refactoring is the first thing, of course, is that you want to refactor a working project. So we would say things like, red, green refactor. So we did test-driven development. That's how I'm trained. I think it's amazing, and especially coming from no background in tech at all. Like if I didn't do TDD, I would be like, yeah, right. Like this is a bunch of numbers and letters, and I don't know what's going on. So if your test suite doesn't pass, don't refactor your code, right? So you have the red, like doesn't pass, you have the green, it passes, then go ahead, go back and refactor. For me, because I can be like really obsessive almost, that kind of comes from my background in classical, being like, I have to get this one measure like amazing and make the audience cry with how beautiful it is in one measure. And then you forget about the rest of the piece, right? Well, I found that I ended up accidentally doing that in some of my projects as well. So I found that time boxing my refactoring is also just a really good way to continue to move forward so that my code can be more maintainable, it's more clean, it looks better, it runs faster, but it's also not like, oh, hey, like, I only got a fourth of this project done, but it looks really nice, right? Your team doesn't really like that. And then the best thing I think that I learned, just kind of by accident, was a really good way to teach yourself new concepts, whether it's like maybe you're using a new language or a new framework or whatever, is to go back and refactor your old projects or your old exercises, as opposed to like keep going. Like at one point I was doing like, I don't know, like maybe like, I don't know, like exorcism after exorcism, and I was like, I'm not learning anything new, I'm super bored, like I'm just doing like tons of projects in Ruby, but I kept doing the same thing, and then my mentor was like, dude, go back and refactor like your first project you ever did. And I was like, oh my gosh, like not only did I learn more and solidify what I already like had kind of needed to know, I also found I had a lot of gaps in my learning. I was like, oh crap, like I don't even fully understand instance variables, like no wonder I'm struggling, So it's a good way for you to show yourself the holes in your learning, just going back and cleaning up your own code base. Oh, also a good way to do that is to refactor someone else's code on the same project as well. I mean, of course, get their permission, but you don't want to show them like, yo, dude, I like did your code, it's so much better. So, yeah. Okay, so on that note, let's do a little bit of refactoring on a little project. So this, can you guys see that? Is that big enough? Okay, so this is a project, it's in Ruby. We're using mini test as our testing suite. And it's called Doggy Daycare, because clearly. And so, as you can see here, well, first I'll prove to you that it does in fact pass. So, Ruby test. Oh my gosh, I'm doing so well typing in front of a room full of people. Okay, so I'm only running that first test. I don't want to run like a ton since we don't have a ton of time, but it works. Cool, we're good. So let's refactor. So what's like a good way that I can look at this and be like, okay, well, how can I make this maybe go a little faster or not have to like just do as much typing? And something I noticed right off the bat is that every time I'm doing a different test, I'm instantiating a new dog object. So this is pretty sweet. I'm not sure if you guys do this, but I do, and it's awesome. I'm just gonna make a little setup method. So what I'll do is I'm just gonna make a dog object. There we go. And then let's just name it comment. And we'll just have it be German Shepherd. Whoops. German Shepherd. Okay, so cool, I did a setup method. So what you want to do too, what I noticed at least, is that every time I make a change, I want to run my test suite because if something's broken, I want to know why. So I'm going to run it. Of course, it's going to, hey, look at that. It'll pass because that's the big use. So let's get rid of this. So we don't have to instantiate the new object now, right? Because we just made it in our setup method. And now let's put name, read, we'll run the test. Hopefully this will work. Hey, look at that. So then now I can go with this, and now I don't have to instantiate a new object every single time. This saves me a ton of typing. Since it's just the exact same thing, hopefully this will, okay. Okay, well. Jokes. Okay, well, whoops. Okay, so sorry, my assertion was different.
Got a new dog that time.
Yeah, my bad. Okay, but as you, yeah, so, yeah. Yay, first ever in front of people. But yeah, so long story short, that, you know, then you go ahead and tweak it and you're like, oh, whoops, I made the name wrong. So that's cool, like with, maybe you have like one class and you're like, okay, yeah, that saves me a little time. Where this really turns out to be nice though, is when you have classes with like multiple dependencies. So later on in my project, I go to like a customer. So now I'm instantiating a new customer every time I have a test. So I could do a setup method with that customer. However, later on down the line, I also am adding dogs to this customer. It's just like part of the project. And instead of having to now make a new dog object and a new customer object, I can make, in my setup method up here, I have like my add customer equals customer.new, and like this is her name, and this is whatever. And then I can reference my instance variable at dog, and it would then pass the test. So then again, I don't have to do twice as much typing. And then later on, I have another class with two dependencies. Now this depends on my dog class and my customer class. So, and then I can again do a setup at daycare, you know, like daycare equals daycare.new or whatever, right? And then just kind of doing instance variables all over my project. So again, I'm just not doing like 1,000 million lines of code and typing, and that's super helpful. And then it's kind of helping me understand too, like, especially as a beginner, like when I first started coding, I was like, I don't know what classes are, like, I don't know how they talk to each other. What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean dependencies? Like, how does it know? Like, how does it, I don't know how to tell it what to do. But then it really helps you understand, like, okay, well, you can find at dog in your dog class. This is where you make dogs, right? This is a dog class, it's a blueprint for dogs, okay? This is your customer class. This is a, you know, that customer, this is where you get your customers from. So I can now understand, oh, like my daycare class is pulling objects from these two other classes, and that really started helping me solidify OOP, because again, like I had no idea what I was doing. And so again, through refactoring an old project, it helped me understand just a basic design principle of what this is all about in the first place. So there you go. Any questions? No? Okay, great, thanks. Yay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Hey, everybody. Thanks. Pretty cool.
Chris, you ready?
Oh, do I get to go?
Yeah.
Can I just sit right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you can.
I don't want the sound will be weird. Everybody's messing around.
You want to sit in this couch up here?
Just turn around. Broadcast your face on the TV. Yeah, just turn the camera on. Let's see. How do I use my own office? That work okay? Look okay? Yeah?
Maybe a little bit bigger.
Yeah. I'll just zoom, right?
Yes. Ah.
Sweet. So my plan was to like show a factor of like, I want to do this like grid of items, and I'm gonna do it like an old school way that maybe some people like have been writing CSS for a long time. It's kind of their default way of thinking and doing things still, and then show you how to redo it in CSS grid. And then I was like, well, let's just take like 90 detours on the way. Okay? So, yeah, well, let's just start with like people, like a list of people, right? And you know, have you ever, and then like, let's say within it there's a person, right? So that's Emmett. Have you seen that in HTML? If I just hit the tab key, I just get that. Or I could say like times 20, and I'll get a whole bunch of them. It gives you a bunch of free HTML really quickly. And even I can use lorem ipsum within it. And if I say lorem like 2, I'll only get 2 words of lorem. So I get a bunch of just, you know, blah, 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 which isn't exactly names, but it's okay, right? What I like about that is it's an abstraction of HTML, but it's an abstraction of HTML that you get once. So it's like you do it and then it's gone. And so it's not maybe always as useful as an abstraction that sticks around that you can use later. So it's like, well, maybe for this demo I'll use Pug. Pug used to be called, something else, Jade, I think. Anyway, but it's like I can go H1, Bend, Oregon, or whatever. Who cares? Bend. It makes an H1, so just H1 space means it'll turn into an H1 tag. It's a little abstraction of HTML that's node-based, and you can write like that. Some people just like the terseness of it or something. I don't think that's compelling enough to use as a product myself, generally, usually, but it's kind of nice, especially for little demos, but it has a cool trick that it can do. So I could go ul.pers people, right? That's gonna make the same thing as, it almost looks like Emmet, doesn't it? But it just stays like that instead of going some other way. So person Chrissy or whatever, it'll generate that. Cool. But it's the trick is that if you put a dash in Pug, now you're writing JavaScript instead. All that is just whatever. It's just like your gateway to JavaScript. So I can go for I don't know, let x equals 0, x is less than 10. You have to format with spaces, otherwise it'll die. X plus plus, and then cool. So that's a loop. I have to indent that, and now I have 20 Chrissies. You know, because it's like an HTML abstract. What is it? What is it complaining about? Shut up. You still mad? There's a temporary angriness from it. Okay. So that's cool, but I don't have lorem ipsum. I can't, there's no like shortcut for lorem ipsum in Pug, but I found one by Googling, and it was like just some Pug that had a bunch of lorem ipsum in it, and then some JavaScript that just does regexes and blah, blah, blah. And Pug has this concept of a mixin, which is just like a function you can call to do stuff. So I just pasted what I found on the internet into this pen, and we have so if you run this, it will run nothing, right? Because it's just a function. It doesn't make any output. But CodePen has this ability to import pens into other pens, which is this triple bracket syntax. So if I do triple brackets, it just like takes whatever it finds in the HTML panel and just chunks it in there before it processes it. So now I have that mixin available to me, which is something like, what's the API for it? Text gen amount format sentence. So the plus is what calls mixins in Pug. So plus, I already forgot what it was called. Text gen, and then it was like 2 words or something. Yeah, okay. So it's a little bit like lorem ipsum where it's grabbing random shit. So okay, cool. Now I have this abstraction that I can use. And if I was going to complete the abstraction, maybe I'd be like const number of people, or however people name constants these days, equals maybe less than that. And then you could use that. And then now I have this like API kind of for if anybody was finding this, they could play around with that number. I could just say 2 and it will reprocess with W. Boo. Sweet, okay. But that's not what we were doing at all. I just wanted some markup to play with. So I wanted to be like, let's say these are people, and I wanted to make like a grid of people. Yeah, cool. So dot people. I'm gonna do this like the old school way first. Dot people is like that's the list. So I can't have no list style, none, and it has margin 0. You know, Emmet works in CSS as well. So M0 tab is margin 0. Like P100 would be padding 100 pixels, or I could put P, which is percentage. It has a bunch of things. It's called like fuzzy search in Emmet. So you just kind of, you don't have to guess. So like mar0 is, oh, that's a weird one. But you can kind of just guess what the property might be and hit tab, and then it will kind of guess for you what you meant. Anyway, so let's zero out the padding and stuff there. Okay, so a person is what we call each individual thing in there, and if we wanted to make a grid of them, maybe we'd be like width 50% or something. Let's make sure we see what we're doing too. So background red or whatever, background red driven development is what I practice. And background blue. Sweet. Okay, but we're making pods, right? So like float left. Float left. So what's gonna happen? The red will go away and they'll all go up next to each other, right? You can't see shit there, so let's color white so you can see what's going on. Well, I'm gonna put some padding on them so that they're spaced out a little bit. We're trying to make pods, right? So like, what happens with 5 pixels of padding? A lot of weird stuff happened. One, you can't see the red anymore, which is a little weird, and they're not next to each other anymore. And they're not next to each other because float just sucks like, well, it's not float's fault in this case. The problem is they're 50% wide and 5 pixels wide, which is a classic web design problem in the past. We've fixed it. You can fix it right here by going box sizing, border box on just it, which means the 5% or 5 pixels of padding is taken within the 50%. So we fix that problem really quickly. And in fact, that's such a common fix these days that I think the internet has decided that this should have been in CSS to begin with. Just apply it everywhere. Screw everything. All right, so there's that, but also let's say I put margin 2, that's gonna screw us too, like that's gonna break it again. But you still don't see the red, and the red is because floats mean that shit collapses, so if I put overflow hidden here, that's gonna clear the flow, like assuming overflow hidden is cool in this context, which let's just say it is. Let's say maybe people have long names or whatever. We get the red back because we've cleared the float, that's fine. These colors are atrocious, let's fix that. We have little, we have nicer colors, just like clickable, available. And here to grab, let's just pick something a little more pleasant, shall we? Probably some border radius, just so everybody's more comfortable. Sweet. Okay, so, but we need to get them back next to each other because we're making pods. So how do we knock off that side? I guess we could knock off, like, what is it, double the margin or something? Like, I don't know. That works. Swell. So nicely operating demo. But look at this. Now, if we get, you know, if we start seeing breakages, like, oh, that's weak sauce, you know? Like, I don't know, what do you do here? Do you start looking up ellipsis kind of shit in CSS or what? And like, it kind of breaks, kind of gross. And then, you know, you get padding on the, you know, like, why is it thicker on the inside and less thick on the outside? Do I rock this? And then does that throw up all my calculations? It wasn't so bad, I guess. I don't know, when I was doing this myself, I'm like, oh, look at all these crap I have to do. It's so terrible. But it's just because I got that calc correctly on my first try. Usually I'm like, it's 20, right? Because it's like triple the margin, but minus the padding, but plus the, you know. And I'm like, I don't know. or is it 5 or 10? But 10 would happen to be the right number there. I guess I could CSS variabilize that, so like the map, like, cause that's just kind of magic. You know, anybody finding this will be like, what's the thinking there? You know, is that this or what? You know, it might be nice to do the same thing that we did in Pugland, which is put some constants in there and use those constants as variables to do stuff. So I guess the point of this talk was though, that, like, why deal with Floatland? Like, Float has all these issues with dealing with calculations and dealing with clearing and has these kind of problems with it and stuff. It gets a lot easier. You know, if we were just like, let's leave the background alone, let's leave the padding alone. Yeah, for the most part, this is fine. We don't need the overflow though. And just get rid of everything but the really pleasant border radius here. Another way to approach this is to just say, display grid. And then I want 2 rows, so grid, template, columns. These are fractional units. This is saying just give me 2 of them. Oh, instantaneously I have that, which is beautiful. And then, oh, I guess I deleted a little bit too much here, shouldn't I? Let's pick a new pleasant color, like a blue that doesn't match. BG tab. Cool, and that's awkward, right? Well, I don't know, what are these little diamonds? It's just because there's no spaces in there. We didn't deal with any of that calculation stuff, but what's nice is you can go grid, gap, 10 pixels, and that just returns quite nicely. Adding 10 pixels, whatever. And I don't have to think about it. Like, these fractional units keep me from having to think about calculating and figuring stuff out in some way. Even 50% will work for the most part. It's like, I don't know, well, I guess I can't ignore that. But this is nice, right? Like this, that's a much like cleaner, nicer experience. It'll go row by row, and if one of them happens to get longer than the other one, it's like, fine, I'll grow this other one. All this is optional and configurable, and you can align things. You have lots of power here. But I think that smart defaults are nice. That like, just these few properties together are kind of end up being simple and easy to wrap your mind around. There's no magic. You don't have to explain anything. You don't really have to document anything. It's kind of self-documented. In fact, isn't this just Gap now? Does that still work? Yeah, they changed that API, which is good to know because grid gap makes plenty of sense and you can use that. You will be able to use that forever, but they made gap work for Flexbox too. So if you remember, you have played with Flexbox and have wanted to control that spacing exactly, Flexbox, it's been a little bit of a tricky thing to handle, and now a row of Flexbox items uses the same exact property to space itself out, which is nice. So that's just a little refactor from the suck that was Float to the pleasantry, which is great. And there's a million more things we could talk about, but it's lightning talk night, so let's do more lightnings. Sweet.
Sweet, who wants to go next? Ready? Paul? Cody?
I'll hop up. I'll give it a shot.
Just jump up there. In the meantime, anybody have any questions for Chris or Akira that didn't get answered that you're thinking of?
Chris, do you remember when doing floats in IE6?
Did IE6 have a special float problem?
And you ended up with double padding.
Double margin.
Or double margin, that's what it was.
Margin bug. How did you trigger it then?
There was some hack where if you did like asterisk margin, only IE would
Well, that's how you fixed it, but how did you trigger it?
I think it's just always, if you put a margin on a float, it automatically doubled it.
That is crazy tough. Yeah, double margin bug. Fun.
The history lightning talk. Take us back.
Well, what was the other way of doing clearing floats? Was it like using adding content and making it like display block to the after?
That's still, in fact, there's a clearing floats museum on
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, about every 2 years there's a new technique for clearing floats that became popularized, and it was always somebody that came along and said like, I'm gonna reevaluate the old, you know. And you remember for a minute there. In fact, maybe this is still the recommended way. It was an after element with blank content in it, and then you'd say display table, which was the weirdest little add-on to it. But the reason was that display table handles margins in a slightly different way than, I can't remember why, but I think that's still like the recommended way as a little after element.
I would like you to pull up that museum.
Okay.
And send it on Slack.
Sure, I'll send it. Yeah.
Yeah, the old bulletproof layout. I don't know who uses Babel here, but it's kind of like everywhere, I feel like. Maybe it's been slowing down a little bit, but if you want to write modern JavaScript and instead of being constrained by the browsers, this takes a lot of the back work off of you. Raise the hands who has used Babel here.
Is it Babel or Babel?
Oh yeah.
That's all right.
I'm not raising Who here has used Babel? Oh yeah, so let's get something out of the way, maybe. How do you pronounce? I decided I'll just say it differently throughout the whole talk. Because some people like to say Babel, and some like to say Babel. And if you actually, let's see if we can actually just pull.
I think it's Babel.
Let's just pull up. Oh, that is a window. I am in a window.
So have you addressed my question?
So Google will even show you how to move your lips in case you're a little confused, which is, let's see if we can get some audio on this. Oh, it's going somewhere. Is there a Bluetooth speaker? Oh, well.
I can read it.
Wait.
She said
Yeah,
Babel.
yeah, there we go.
Oh.
But if you're a British, so yeah, depends how fancy you're feeling for the game. Now that we got that out of the way. Why though? Why would you want to go from 6 to 7? Like your world's working. Why would you want to just throw a wrench into the spokes? So you gotta update or you're gonna perish. It's just basic geometry. That's what I said. And then there's NPM security audits. Like every time I see like a problem, like I'm ready to flip a table, I'm like the world's gonna burn. I just want that to be at 0. It's a perfect world, but it doesn't exist. And then now we've got the beautiful GitHub security audits after they bought up that one company, and they're just trying to kind of give you I think it was like called Greenly, where they try to keep your stuff up to date as long as you have tests around it. And then just security in general, Peace DevOps, new features will be coming out, so you want to stay up with them. Oh, did not know I could scroll. So let's see here. So yeah, if you're using Webpack, if you were on version 4 and you wanted to get up to version 5, that's been out since March 2018, so it's been quite a while. Then there's Rails Webpacker, which it's got a lot more hurdles to jump through, but it's good. It makes life better. And then Jest, I think, was one of the ones where if you were on like version 22 or 23, it had a lot of auditing issues for security vulnerabilities, and they just were like, we're not patching this, like just update. But to do that update, you also had to update your Babel. And then you've got people that will just get out of here. What are you doing? Nope. Then you got people that just, I guess that's just gonna be there forever. So people just leave comments like, Docker doesn't like more recent versions. It's because they went probably up to version 4 and it was just a breaking change, and of course your CI is not gonna run, all your tests aren't gonna pass. So yeah, when you go to the major update, we're like with the whole semantic versioning, right? You got your major, your minor, and your patches. So patches shouldn't be breaking anything, but you start talking about major stuff, and you actually gotta like start reading documentation and sweating and trying to figure out what's going on. So some of the things that like when I've done this upgrade, like you always run into package JSON dependencies. So a lot of the earlier Babel packages were just Babel dash with a prefix, and now they've all moved over to @Babel / for the package naming. There's also, they introduced babelconfig.js, which is really nice if you want to start having like environment variables that you're triggering your configuration off of. You don't have to go to babelconfig.js, but it's a good time. I'd recommend it unless you just have something really static and basic.
You do if you have cascading configs,
Nice.
a monorepo style.
Yeah, and I was reading about that. I'm like, luckily I haven't been down that path, but they started talking about all this like hierarchical loading and shenanigans. So we're like, this is the way to go. If I was reading correctly too, I'm not a professional, but these were just like some of the things I was running into. Maybe they're old, maybe they're not accurate, but it looked like they're getting rid of Babel polyfill. Next time I'll say Babel, it's easier. So they also have this amazing V7 migration. So they've got like a huge, just look at that scroll bar, it's a huge Bible of information. But they decided that, let's go back there real quick too. So they were saying that pretty much like this is all polyfill was doing, they were saying. I didn't actually check it out, but they were like, oh, just import these. So if you actually want those libraries, just include them yourself. So, and then they also removed the regenerator runtime. I was like, I'm not even sure what you do, but I think it does, it helps you out with async, if I remember right.
Yep.
And then if you have coverage, your life's gonna be a lot better. So if you don't have your coverage and tests, you might wanna do that before you start on this journey, but if you have that much checked out, it might just be like mission impossible, so just YOLO. Let's see. So here was just a little quick snippet of like what happened in package.json when I was going from, I feel like I didn't get everything here, but it just went from like, oh, here's a couple of things, because you used to just say like, oh, give me a preset. And now, if I remember correctly, now you have to like explicitly say like, we're using this and we're using that. I think there is a way that you can actually run, I don't know if it's, I think it's Babel, that you can run it in debug mode and actually see all the polyfills that are loading. So by doing that, given your targeted browsers, you can actually determine, hey, we should actually include all these over here. Hey, look, it's right there. What is this? This is madness. Maybe I like. And then there's just so much information. Like if you start on this URL, they're like, oh, we're getting rid of stage presets. So then you check out their awesome README, and then you come here, and then they're like, well, you should check out our blog post and why we did this. And then they have issues, and it just becomes a huge rabbit hole. And you're like, this is just one small point out of a huge apple that we're trying to get through. So sometimes you gotta go down those rabbit holes. It sucks, but hopefully you don't have a crazy configuration and it's easy for you. Then I was running out of time, but let's see. So a lot of people, you just have all your configuration in your Babel RC file, and I like to try and extract that stuff out. You could throw it into your package.json, but if there's an explicit configuration file for something, I like to move it to there. So if you move out to like your browser list RC, you can go in there and say, I want to target anything that's over 1% of browsers, or you can target specific IE versions, and then you can easily just type in npx browser list, and it's going to tell you all the targeted browsers you're after. If you haven't looked at browser list, you should check it out, because it's in there, it's running, it's magic. Let's see. Oh yeah, one nice thing is with Babel JS config is you can do those environment variables, so you can add additional scripts into your package.json so that you can have like build debug, or just have it spit out and show you everything, like your targeted browsers, or like what scripts are causing what polyfills to actually come through. Should have gave an example of that. Oh yeah, don't be like me. And once you get your test suite passing, you should just slap that merge button after it goes through PR. Don't wait 3 months and like catch up to master and be like, oh dang, everything's broke again. Kind of forgot about that pull request. And then just document your journey, whether it's going to be coming up and giving a talk or just to help out your peer review. And sometimes you just gotta like trace the lines back up and see where you even went down the rabbit hole. So that can be really helpful. Is that the last slide? So yeah, there's all these, the visa migration that's on there. So that's that huge page with everything you could ever wish for. Hopefully you'll probably run into some issue pages you'll run into because it just won't be in the documentation. I did actually find something in here that said they have a script that's supposed to auto-magically migrate you, but I'm doubtful it will work, but I have high hopes. I didn't get a chance to play around with it, found it after the fact, so maybe instead of doing all this stuff, you want to give that a shot. But I would be interested to see how much it matches up with a manual migration. And then if you have the Rails Webpacker in there, it's a lot more extra hurdles to go through as well. Their documentation's a little bit more spotty. I think that's it. Oh yeah, this was actually, like this was a nice resource to just be like, hey, like what did somebody else do? This was when, I think they were upgrading their Webpacker, which all cascaded down to all the other dependencies updating. Like they nuked the Babel RC. But yeah, this was also for the Rails Webpacker. I want to zoom out, but I know I should. But then you also end up, like they have some generators too that can like spin up some stuff, but you end up with just, like I thought this was really ugly for the configuration file. But I mean, if you're not living in here, whatever. Something else to remember is not to get too fancy with your JavaScript in here, because I'm like, oh, I could like try this up and make it awesome, but this is a pre-battle, so don't get too crazy. Then again, it's running on Node.js, so you got a little bit more wiggle room. That's about it. I was gonna say, has anybody actually did an upgrade like this before? Was it smooth? Was it painful?
Yeah, ours was really small though, so it was pretty easy. We just had preset 2015 to just basically what you said.
That's that.
We did it for our code base. Our code then was kind of a pain in the ass, but then we had to do it for the users too, because we don't have like you pick Babel 6 or pick Babel 7. You just pick Babel and it just does it. But we didn't want to like just stay behind forever. So when I went to 7, we had to, because you lose the presets, we had to go hand pick every single plugin that we want to have them use and have our own special config for it, which is a little bit of a pain, but it wasn't too bad. But then the worst thing we have about it is that we wanted to not like start giving up on like, people expect Babel to do your lets and your consts and your arrow functions and all that crap. We didn't do that because I feel like those days are like dang near over.
Yeah.
Like just basic ES6 crap, you don't really need the charts filing. I mean, yeah, everybody's browser support targets are different, I get that, but we have to just pick one and roll with it. So we picked the same ones as the CodeNet website itself. Like you can't run IE9 on CodeNet anyway, so like, we make it compile up to our own
Download a better browser.
Yeah.
But it's a huge support request now. They're like, your Babel's broken. Because they just type const something and then check and see and it doesn't compile it.
Yeah, IE11 is a weird game. Like you get arrow functions and all this cool stuff, but you can't run a standard class, so don't get too crazy.
Yeah.
The sex time is bad. Alright, cool. Thank you guys.
Cody, that was a really good precursor, and I'm just gonna jump in and call you out.
Real bad right now.
If you scroll down just a little bit on
I know
there,
there's an auto.
you just start reading, oh shit, I should just do this thing that the docs tell me to do. And you know what? It actually works really, really well.
So you should
You
use
gotta
it.
give it a try.
And the reason I also wanted to call this out is because it is the actual
It's their team.
meat behind what I want to talk about, which is automating your refactors. So Babel Upgrade, use it, it's super easy. Babel Upgrade itself uses what I want to talk about, which is, so if you're writing Babel, has anybody used the REPL before? So really simply, so let's write like an async await function, because that's all the new hotness now. So if we have like async function foobar, and then we say, like, what the shit is all of that over there? Right? So there's all this stuff that it spits out. Babel is basically doing a transformation or compilation. It's technically compiling your code, but it is doing exactly what automated refactoring can do for you. You can actually do the exact same thing that Babel is doing by using Babel itself, which is crazy, right? Oop, one too many. Okay, so this is the AST Explorer. Does anybody know what an AST is? It stands for Abstract Syntax Tree. So what that means, you'll see I've got Babylon 7 checked up here. That's the syntax tree generator, I guess, that we're going to use. So what you see on the left is what I'm going to type in, and what's on the right here is what this tree is built out of for us. So if we say const foo equals, let's just start with a real basic. You'll see this thing. All of a sudden we have, okay, we start with a program. Every file is a program, basically. And then it has a body. And then we get a variable declaration. That is const foo. So if we start moving around in here, I can actually move my cursor around and it will highlight what I'm looking at. So we have a variable declaration, and inside those declarations is a variable declarator, which has an identifier. Its name is foo. And then that equals an initializer for a null literal. If I were to change that, and I want to say this is now an array, we now see it's an array expression. And that array expression can have some elements in it, like one, numerical literal, or string, can't type. And now it has a string literal. So you can actually get all of this kind of information about the entire tree of everything that you're writing. I'm trying to dive in here, there we go. Which has some extra data, which is the raw value and the value. I guess they parsed it, it's all kinds of crazy. So this is the most absolute basic example. If we were to copy that async function foo over here, you can see it's actually really, really simple. When we start looking at it, we just have a function declaration, and it says I have an identifier. That identifier's name is foo, and it is a generator. No, it is async. Yes, and then it can have a block function, block statement inside of it. We can do things and screw it up. There's an identifier. That's totally cool by it. Anyway, so why am I showing you this? What can we do with this? If we blow this up and add transform in here, I'm going to use JS code shift. We can use Babel, we can use ESLint. So this is actually what ESLint, Prettier, TypeScript all use under the hood. They use a different transformation package on top of something else that reads the tree, like Babel. And so I've kind of jumped in here, and let me just make these go away quick. I don't know what happened. Just to show you, I've got two functions here. I've got foobar and tacocat. And so you can see as we jump in there, you can see here's my identifier function foobar, and here's tacocat. They're both block statements, have nothing in them. There's nothing really special about this. But now in the bottom section here, I've got a transformer function. And this transformer function, so just if you go to astexplorer.net, I think this is actually the default that it shows you, so I didn't actually write this. All this is doing, it says, okay, I've got an API, and we're going to pull a JS code shift off this API. And as we run through here, we're going to send the file source through JS code shift. We're going to find every identifier that exists in this code. And for each one, we are going to replace that with a new identifier, which is the original identifier's name reversed. So on the right, you can say, now I don't have foobar anymore, I have Raouf and tacocat. This tacocat is a palindrome. So that's the very, very like super basics. You can rewrite your code with JS code shift. And so JS code shift, better look that up because apparently I don't have it in here, is actually just a command line interface that you can then run against one of these transformation code files to rewrite lots of files across your code base into from what it was before to something new. So that's actually what the Babel upgrade package does, is it just passes through, it finds the files that it needs to do, and it rewrites those files for you. So it would have rewritten your Babel config, it would have figured out, oh, you need all of these different packages, I'm gonna also add those into your package JSON for you. So it would do all that kind of stuff for you. So here, this is the last thing I'm gonna show, because I'm blasting through this really fast, but it's lightning talk, right? This is an actual example from something that I wrote probably about a year ago, so I don't really remember it exactly, but here it is. So at one point, we used reselect at Twitter for creating our connected components, which are anything that pulls from Redux and puts data into a React component. It will use a reselect selector to pull that out of the Redux state and put it into the component. What we found as we started adding our fancy flow types to things, we weren't able to get very good automatic typing out of create structured selector. It actually just, because you would have to type every one of these functions, it didn't work very well, it was very difficult, and we had about 196 instances of this. We didn't want to use it anymore. We wanted to use the more generic create selector, which has a different API, which is actually what's down here in the bottom. So you can actually see it takes an object and has a bunch of keys, and those keys each have a function that returns some information. Create selector, however, wants to take a bunch of different arguments and then return those into the last function. It's actually called composition, and return those as an object. So we wanted to rewrite every time we use create structured selector to have this end result down here at the bottom. So that's exactly what we did. If I can move this bigger. First off, we say fix the imports, because at the top you see we have create structured selector. We need to change that to create selector. I don't have to go through any one of these files by hand, and I don't want to have to copy paste into every one of these because I'm definitely going to screw it up. So what we did, we have this fix imports. So we look through every import declaration, and then for each one of those that we find, we make sure that it is actually trying to import create structured selector. And then when it does, we basically just run through this, have a bunch of extra little fun things, and we say, replace that with create structured selector, or create selector, sorry, right in here. It's basically all we did. However, it also works if you have some other thing in there. So we had to do a bunch of extra little bits for that. So that's why this is actually a better way of refactoring code, because you can prevent yourself from accidentally, oh, I deleted that by accident when I went through it. And you won't have that problem. You won't get caught by your CI. Hopefully you have some sort of CI, making sure that all of your imports exist. And that's pretty much it. And then you go through and we have this crazy function. Let's see if I can walk through it quick. We look for every call expression. A call expression is essentially you're calling a function. Let's see if I can go up one. There we go. It is a call expression when you call a function. So we look through and we find every call expression, and then we say, hey, is that create structured selector? I could actually have gone one level deeper in refactoring this, but thankfully our developers don't do weird stuff like doing that. Now none of this would have worked, or did it? Oh, it did. Because, the abstract syntax tree actually does nice things for us. And because we're looking at the callee name, why is it not working out? We're looking at the import specifier and not the local identifier. So it actually gets organized that way. So we look through, we find every time we are trying to call that function, and we pull off each one of, or we pull off the first argument, which is a structure. We grab all of the property values, those are the selectors, so this would be what I would refer to as a selector in here. And then we look at finding all of the keys, and we essentially just rewrite them then into, let's see if I can understand what happens here. We take the selectors, interesting. Oh, so we actually just take each one of these selectors, put them in order, and drop them right into the arguments here. So that's what happens right about here, where we have a call expression, and we drop those into the called arguments. The last thing is we have the return params of the return, and we have that be a arrow function expression, which is our short fat arrow function here. And we tell it that it returns an object expression, which is the return keys. Where did we make the return keys? Right up here, where we have for each one of the identifier key names on this object, which is ident, we create a new property, which is saying now that's what I'm doing. So we're making up the arguments for this arrow function expression, and then returning them into the return keys at the bottom. Crazy, crazy stuff. So we were able to write this in maybe an hour or so, and run it in about 20 seconds across 197 different files, and we were done. We didn't have to do anything because all our tests passed and everything looked right. And if I were to have done that by hand, it probably would have taken 4 to 8 hours, and I would have hated everything. And one word of warning, JS code shift is very limited on its documentation. So have fun reading its code.
We're making some pretty good time. You want to go? Awesome.
There should be like a little air share icon. Where are you?
Just like when it's creating this like stream of like just like a very linear like tokenized version of the stream of the entire code. See that creates the entire tree like a for node, and then inside that this other code.
Nice.
Alright, go through this real quick. I'm Martin Hoffman. I'm a front-end developer. I work on design systems for a company called H-Shapes out of Washington, D.C. We build design systems and component libraries for companies. I'm going to go through just an example. This is like a simplified version of an alert component that I refactored. Initially it was in CSS just using BIM. I'll go to the first page here. So anybody not familiar with BIM, it just stands for block element modifier. It's really just a naming methodology. So really you just start with the base is alert and then modifier. You just add a couple dashes, and then for each element within the component, you just do a double underscore. And that way you just kind of know just by looking at the code what the class name is for. Our design systems usually have design tokens. This example shows the design tokens as CSS variables. So all the design decisions are stored and made here. This way you can just change it in one spot. It's like a single source of truth. You can see here that like the background color for info, this is the base color, is our blue, error is red, and warning, and so on. And then for this example, I actually stored the icon as just an emoji. So each one of these is also pulled from the design token. Just to look at what the actual CSS style sheet looked like before, you can see the CSS variable is pulled in here for each one. And then each modifier needed its own class name. So each one of those had to be written out explicitly to create the whatever the modification was. In this case, it's just in color. You can see that warning is a little different because it needs a different text color as well. And then the icon and the element is using a pseudo element to fill the content here. I think I left it out here for some reason. But anyway, you can see how the modifiers work there. And then quick look at the JX. JSX was just, whatever type you put in, we were using a utility called class names that would just concatenate whatever, conditionally add the modifier class based on that prop that was sent in. So in this case, type is warning. The modifier will be alert warning. And that creates the yellow one here. So just standard markup. And this way, with BIM you can see, what each class name is for, what it's doing, and kind of gives a little meaning to it as well. And then when we refactored it, we used CSS and JS. We used Emotion.js, which is just a little library that helps do the CSS and the JS. And the design token here was just a JSON object, just slightly bit easier to read, I think. Same concept. All the properties are stored there, or all the variables. And then the emotion styles, you can see, is a lot shorter. So it dries it out a little bit. We don't repeat ourselves as much in this way. All it does is it goes through the JSON object, it just goes through, and then based on the type property, it actually looks up the value based on that. And you don't need to write the modifiers out. It just creates the styles on the fly. The JSS is exactly the same, so you don't have to change any instances. It still pulled it in. Everything looks the same. And then the markup that's compiled, Emotion just adds this random prefix to the class name, which is nice for namespacing. It helps avoid collisions and things like that. It's a little less readable than BIM, but it has its advantages. And then here's just a side-by-side comparison, so you can kind of see what the variables look like. Again, I think the JSON is a little easier to read. A lot of times in our design systems, we'll start with the JSON object, and then it'll compile into whatever's needed for the system, so it can do CSS variables or SAS variables, depending on the need. And then the style sheet side by side really shows the difference, I think. The motion styles are a lot shorter. CSS styles have a lot more to it to write out each one of them manually. JSX is the same. And then just to kind of see this side by side. And really that's it. Just a quick little lightning talk, but it's just a little closing thoughts. CSS is nice because it has the code clarity. BIM I think is easy to read. It helps you understand. Like I said, it's framework agnostic, so you can distribute it. So if you're doing like a foundational CSS thing, it helps you distribute it a little easier. There's more code. Really complex components can get really bloated. CSS and JS has your namespacing, so you don't have to worry about collisions. Smaller file size, but then if you decide to change languages, you're stuck. What do you do with your styles? You have to either rewrite them or port them over somehow. Yeah, that's it. Super quick lightning talk. Any questions about how that works or anything?
Just wait.
All right, thanks.
Hey, do you have anything other than AirPlay on here, like maybe Google or HDMI?
HDMI, right?
I don't know, it might be do your laptop or try Chromecast.
Yeah. Is there a Chromecast in that?
It might support Chromecast, yeah.
Oh,
It's a TV. Don't they all have Chromecast?
Fine.
I was just about to say we're on Max. You don't want to curse us.
I was gonna say, that's gonna kind of mess if we want to put an HDMI cable like that.
I think there is one actually.
And I've got one with me, but I don't know
There's an example.
if yeah.
How much do you like this TV?
Just
Stand really close to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna pull it right.
I have one, but I don't know how to call you.
We could move the podium.
My. I don't even know where it's connected to.
Here, let's get this over there.
Yeah.
Just-
And then just plug in right here.
Yeah.
That'll work. Alright. We have to like take the TV off, I think, if we want to make it longer.
Has everybody already presented? Because this has nothing to do with refactoring or.
I was gonna do hooks.
Oh, were you? Dude, I'm sorry.
No, it's. I was gonna say, quick presentation. We got time.
Okay.
I can finish it off. Yeah. Go for it.
Let's see if this works. It'll be a different input, right?
Actually, I thought I just took that off the Apple TV that's currently connected, so how is the Apple TV still showing up?
Well, maybe
Do we have two Apple TVs back there?
There's two remotes. Maybe there is.
Bureaucracy.
No, it can't be.
Some other.
I think we have.
Is there? Maybe there really is. Because did you literally unplug
I
it?
literally unplugged it from Apple TV.
So does that mean
Wow.
the 6 Dungeon Apple TV is also yours?
Yeah.
didn't know.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Is it really?
I bet it was from the Game of Thrones thing that we did.
Oh, maybe.
Does this cord even actually go to the TV?
I don't know.
There's
That one came.
totally two of them back.
Are there?
You just order one every once in a while. And people have one.
Yeah.
One Windows series makes so much trouble.
Is that?
Yeah. Oh,
There we go.
Oh my god.
Hey.
All right.
Alright. I could probably survive without it. Yeah.
So you guys are gonna have to get away for this Apple TV.
Wow.
Thanks for coming. See ya.
Hopefully we'll have that because this is such a shift. Now you have to unplug the power from it before you now. Power was
Still going?
It is. I just want to set the power
Maybe cloud.
options to
Stay on.
I think this will
not
work,
turn
actually.
off.
I like that aspect ratio. Okay. This is just a quick. I'm gonna walk you guys through how I solve something. I'm working on this project with the local symphony. We're doing some kind of web interactive thing with music. We're not really sure what we're doing. It's pretty artsy kind of thing. Yeah.
Feels it.
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to explore was how do I get my JavaScript to talk music, and specifically, if I've got audio tracks, how does my JavaScript understand anything musically about these audio tracks? All we know is what the position is of these songs and their length. I mean, it's pretty basic. So I started with math here. So let me open up some of my notes. There we go. So just give you some background in how
how music translates to an audio file, right? So if anybody has any background in reading music, you understand that these are bars and these are your beats in these bars. So this is how I want my JavaScript to understand the music. I wanted to know how this rhythm works. I wanted to know when these notes hit off. So assuming Jingle Bells is in a constant tempo through this entire song, we should be able to calculate at what point in the song each of these bars occurs. So let's pretend Jingle Bells is in 60 beats per minute. That's going to be 1 beat every second. So each of these quarter notes would be 1 second long, pretty slow. It's just, and so at the end of this bar, we've passed 4 seconds, and so on. So it's pretty basic if you have a song with really consistent tempo. You don't have to put together any complicated formulas for this. So I mean, we should be able to see that. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 times 4, we should be at 32 seconds here. So, okay, let's talk code now. So what I started working on was a way to abstract these musical signatures into code that I could specifically listen for events. So I wanted to create an API where I could listen for when does measure 1 happen, when does measure 2 happen. And I put together this thing called click track. And what it does is it fires off I think best way to go through this. I'm going to show some examples here. Okay, so this is a really simple example of how this works. We've got a new click track and our tempo is 60. And anytime our click track gives us a beat event, we want to update the internet HTML. So now we've got some kind of understanding for how rhythm works in our JavaScript. This is pretty cool. We can we could probably do more complicated things with this, but this still has nothing to do with music. This is just an imaginary beat. But let's say we started producing some kind of events when we listen for these beats. We can create like a metronome. So at the top of the bar, play audio track 1. Any other beat, play the other audio track. But again, we're still not doing anything interesting. I mean, this is just, yeah, it's pretty basic. But the reason is because we're making up our own timer. We still haven't talked to any kind of audio track. But what's really fun is specifically HTML audio has an API for getting the audio position. So we should be able to calculate for any song or any bit of music that's playing, we should be able to calculate what the current beat is at. We just need to know a few things. One, we need to know the tempo of the song. And this trick that I'm going to show you, this only works if the tempo is the same for the entire song. Again, it gets more complicated otherwise. And the other thing we want to do is we want to look at this music and see where does the song start. So with those 2 bits of information, we can create a timer. And this click track I've estimated to be 135.32 beats per minute. The way I did that by the way. There's some tools out there you can use. You play a song, you can use like, you're just estimating the beats that way. You can also just calculate it by looking at the peaks of these, peaks of this audio. Okay, anyway, so this is what we get. I think this is really cool because it takes a while to get to this point, and I know this is kind of gimmicky, but we know exactly what beat we're at any point. We can pause it, keep playing, we can even scrub it. It's still in sync. We still have it. This is just simple math, by the way. We're not. Well, all we're doing is we're taking the time signature and then calculating where it's at. So it's fun, all right. So now we've got some understanding for the music. We can take this a little bit farther, right? Like, so what if we can start controlling things with the JavaScript, right? We can start doing some fun things. So let's throw in like a GIF library to control GIFs. Maybe we want to control the GIF with the music, right? I don't know.
We're getting started.
But what's really fun is like imagine you create a whole design pattern around a page, perhaps, and you classify different parts of the song, because songs, they change, right? You've got an intro, you've got your chorus, and then bridges happen. Hold on. Anybody know how I get my editor? There we go. Okay, so I want to describe some things about a song. Specifically, I've got an intro to the song, and these are the bars that the intro happens. I don't know what to call this, but like the chorus happens and it sort of climbs. So that's when these are the bars that happens. And there's like this bridge type thing. It happens for 4 bars. And then the song just keeps going. I don't know if this is the chorus, but it just keeps repeating itself. It's dance music. So it just does its thing. So we're going to use the YouTube API. We're going to bring in a video. Videos, just like audio, we can have the current time, bring that in, tempo, offset. And for this, we're going to set our timer source to this video that I'm bringing in. And so this is really fun here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change classes on the body. Anytime we have a beat, we're going to add the word beat to our body class. Anytime we have the offbeat, every other beat, we're going to add offbeat to the body class. And then for each bar, we want to keep track, is this beat 1, 2, 3, or 4? And then I'm also going to add these classes, these names to the body class, so I can keep track of those. So I spent some time before this meetup, and I drafted up some ideas, what might be fun to do with this. So you've got your Daft Punk homepage. This is your new band, and you're trying to show off your new music video. So you start doing something cute, right? With your buttons. And this user's like, what's going on here? Like, is this? I guess these buttons are just like going with this music. I don't know. Well, this is strange. Okay, it's getting kind of clever, I suppose. So this is like the chorus climb, is what I called it. It's like in the beginning of the song where it starts building anticipation. You got something going on with the bridge. Just increase in saturation. Maybe get a little crazy now. Anyway, that's pretty much it. All these little styles are tied to like offbeats, what bar it is, the modulo of the bars.
That's so cool.
Anyway. Any questions about it?
So many.
Yes.
So yeah, how much time we
Why?
got?
You tried out Sonic Pi at all? That Sonic Pi? Is that, everybody check out Sonic Pi, it's pretty cool, you can write
Yes.
code, music code.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. It's,
Is it web stuff?
yeah, you can run it in the web.
Okay.
But you can download it, you can run it from the command line.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's really cool, it's fun.
Yeah.
Music as code is a fun idea.
Okay, I'll check it out. Thanks.
Yeah.
What's that?
I'm pretty sure it's in your.
Is it?
Is it in your Sonic Pi?
Sonic Pi, I'm not
Did you
sure.
write it?
I just played around with it on the command line.
That was, what was that, the convention? Because they had a DJ that was just writing for music.
Yes,
Oh, no way.
yeah.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty dope. I've seen people take it from the, I don't think I
Oh.
can, but it moves like 2 minutes, but, yeah.
First time I heard about Great Fire Tank.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so you wrote that from the ground up, and it's all, all these events you can just tap into.
Yeah, it's a whole, some kind of event-driven,
Totally.
rhythm.
And you're doing it with the symphony?
Yeah.
How are you gonna account for all these crazy tempo changes?
Well, we have a composer who's putting together a song that's static tempo. So later on, we're implementing tempo maps.
Yes.
But I don't know what composers or producers are using with tempo maps and what the standard is. So.
Sir, you can install your fonts. I see that with a lot of people.
Oh man, you didn't install Powerline fonts?
Say what now? Alright, well, ignoring my setup.
Serious.
Okay, we can't have this discussion. Save this till next time. Well, thank you all for going through that. That was some really cool presentations. I like this quick to the point. Like I said, if you have any questions, speak up at the end. I'll try to keep this quick because I know we're getting close to time, but I just wanted to say thank you guys for coming out and being the core group that came out this time. And next time, I think we have a couple different things in mind. One of them is that we've been talking about is kind of a social. I know we tried to kind of get one going last year, but I heard some interest. I'll put a poll out on Slack, so keep an eye out for that, but we might try to do some kind of social barbecue, something, or combine that with a few presentations, and if I can figure out a way to get a barbecue out on the deck here without Chris knowing about it, and cook a bunch of burgers or something, maybe we can find a way to combine. So we will be doing something next month, and that should be out to you guys pretty shortly. All right, so to finish this up, I am going to show very high level overview and hopefully smooth overview of hooks. Interesting. Okay, well, I hope my code stayed, because it doesn't look like it's there. Okay. Well, so my original component looks like it didn't save somehow. Didn't get committed before I checked out a new branch. But this will be really close. I was doing a little bit of setup work to kind of have a bridge in between the component and hook style, but we're kind of jumped to the middle there. But what we have here is a very basic component in the super, now I guess, old style. Yeah, exactly. I know I forgot that I had to bind stuff, and I was like trying to go as far back as I felt comfortable. Just FYI, if you're still doing this, I'd recommend changing and just at least upgrading one state if you're not moving all the way to hooks. But I'll show you the refactor there. But yeah, so I just created a simple form that should do some validation. That's not email. And not very functional, but enough to show you just kind of a basic component and how you might go about it. So we kind of have our big state object that's going to hold a whole bunch of crap, or a couple different functions, handle change function, where you actually have to grab the events, destructure the name and value out of it, and then add the value to whatever name is on your state object. If we're really explicit with this.setState. Same with kind of handle submit, where we're grabbing kind of the state objects and we're going to go ahead and validate them, running them through a validate function, and then setting the state for the error and kind of the error message. And then if there's no error, normally this would probably be some kind of API call, post call, so either a promise change or an async await, but for now, it's just if there is no error, then I'm going to go ahead and get the data, which is just going to be essentially a mock API call or something. Some setup, again, don't pay attention to the code, it's really ugly, not the point. But again, setting state, being very explicit with it, and then inside your render function, we're grabbing our state object, saying, well, if we have success, we're going to return this other success message, which is going to look like sweet. Very basic. But what this shows is just kind of how to, in a very non-functional style of writing React components, how you'd actually go about doing that. And if you've never used styled components before, that's what these kind of capital M, capital I inputs button are. They're up here. That's a whole different discussion. Very similar to the CSS and JS that Martin did with Emotion, just a little bit different library. But bottom line is this is kind of ugly. It's verbose. You're doing a lot of conditionals right there in your code, trying to figure out what you're returning. And one thing that's not in here that you would most likely see is some kind of component did mount, component will unmount, your lifecycle methods, your component did update, trying to figure out when different things should render, things that you want to get on the initial, like an API call maybe that you're making right when the component loads, and then you have another one. So what we're going to do is kind of tear this apart real quick and just give you a high-level overview of what hooks can do. And then I was going to try to get to using the context part of hooks, but probably won't get there today. So first off, I'm going to rip out my component, and I'm going to say, I'm going to bring in useState and use effect. And what that's going to allow me to do is go ahead and rip that whole thing out, and I'm just going to export default. Just turn it into a normal function instead of a class component. What it's also going to allow me to do is take this whole ugly thing, and I'm going to delete it in a second once I switch all these things over. So for state, it's really nice. The new useState is a function call that returns an array with two values, or kind of values. One is the actual value of that state, and then the second is an updater function. So I'm going to say I'm just going to take my first name, last name, and email, because the rest I'm going to move out into kind of a separate function and my own hook. But for now, I can just do first name, that's the value, and then set, and I'm going to be a little more verbose here, set first name, and then just say use state, and my initial value goes there. So this is what it gets loaded up with as soon as the function component loads. This is the actual value you can use all throughout the app. It's a kind of scoped variable for the entire function. and then this is your updater function. So whenever you call that, you don't have to say this, you don't have to bind it to anything, you just call set first name, you pass in any value, and that'll set that as the value of the first name. Last name, email. And I'm setting those all to blank. So I'm gonna go ahead and just, boom, delete that whole thing. And he doesn't love deleting code. Next thing we're gonna do is actually go ahead and take off this handle change function, because we do not need to use that. Instead of using handle change and having to do all this magic, we're just gonna call these updater functions. So set first name, set last name, and set email. I'm gonna delete that, and then right down in here, where you have your on change, I'm gonna go ahead and just say set first name. And actually, but this is set last name. Set email. And this, instead of being this dot state, is just going to be the actual variable. So it kind of just cleans it up already, really cleaning up everything you want to do. In terms of an on-click handler, you can still have a function, but it's no longer bound to an object like that, so we can just say, if I want to do here, I can just call it a function, and it works that way. Okay, so let's get rid of all this. We're going to leave that because we're going to still have a success and a message. That's just going to come back from calling our own hook. And what we're going to do is take essentially all of this and throw it into our own hook, essentially, and build our own. So we're going to call this use API. Create it? Yeah.
Is that your missing file?
That one's not missing. No, I was missing the form.
Oh.
I was supposed to have a form, it was just the whole component. So I'm gonna space it in here. Essentially, creating your own hook, it's not magic. It's just essentially creating a utility function. The reason it's part of this kind of API change and it's included in the documentation is it follows certain conventions. So you have the use beforehand, so you're going to be using your own hook, just like the use context, use state, use effect. And then we're going to essentially do all this magic in there, and it's just going to return what you want it to return. And then in my form, instead of having to set them to state so I can get them inside my render function and make sure they're staying the same each time, all I have to do is say error message, I don't need either of those. Error message. And now I can actually use those the exact same way throughout the whole component. The one other thing I wanted to show before we go, probably won't get all of this up and running, maybe save this for a slightly longer talk and actually go through some of the funky things, but the one other thing that I did want to show was how to do those lifecycle methods and how to make sure that, and how to actually optimize them a little bit, at least on a basic level, so they're not running every time. So with use effect, it works very similar to how use state does, except in this case, you're just calling the actual function, and we're going to pass in a function. We're going to go ahead and return anything that we want to actually happen every single time this component re-renders. So it re-renders the same with state changes, but we can actually manage that within these effects. So the way, what was my little example? Oh yeah, I'm going to take out this whole thing. So most of the time you just call it in a function, but instead of calling this in a function, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say set clicked, and I'm going to make this just a state thing. Okay, so when the app initializes, it's going to say it's not clicked. Obviously, you'd never actually do it this way, but for an example, when that button is clicked, we want it to actually hit set clicked. And then that click is going to fire off our API events. So in here, I'd say something along the lines of, this thing. So in here is where I'd actually make the call to use API. And I pass in whatever I need to, so just some value that I built based on the state. So that could be my first name, last name, and email. And I'm gonna pass those into my use API, maybe throw in a weight in front of that if it's if it's gonna return a promise, and then I can go ahead and do whatever I want with that data, and that's where we kind of get into context. But the one cool thing I wanted to show you is this will run every single time. But what if we only want to make sure that this function runs when that button is clicked? So that's why I set that little flag on state is we can pass in an array here. And what that array does is it determines anything inside that array, it will watch. It's kind of like an observable style, but it's just watching that flag or that value. And if that value changes, then everything inside this effect will run. So if we pass in an empty array, that's like a component did mount, where it's only going to run once because it's not watching anything. So it's going to run the first time and that's it. But in this case, we want to see if click changes, so I can pass in clicked here, and when that button is clicked, this effect is going to fire. Final thing I want to show you with effect, and then I'll go, is having an actual return value. So let's say you throw an event listener in here, where right when it loads, so let's say this component did mount, right when it loads, you're going to add an event listener somewhere in your component, but then you would need to clean that up, and that's where the component will unmount would come into place, and that's where your return value would. So if I had something like listen equals use event listener, I think that's right, something, right? And then I created some kind of event listener, and then here's where I can call listen. And that's going to run right before the event unmounts. And then this would be gone, that would be gone, and that would be gone. So we went from just with that super basic, weird example, we went from about 130, 140 lines, I think I saw right before, to 75, just deleting a whole bunch of utility functions that were actually playing up the actual component. So many times I've seen components that just end up getting so far out of hand because you're trying to throw all the logic in there, and you can. You know, you have the ability to add functions to your class and do all this logic right within there, but the main point of what hooks was built for is to create a much more functional version of the React API, and at least that's what it seems like to me. I know we got a couple of people who use hooks a lot. Actually, I never asked who's used hooks before. Sweet. So, love it? Yes. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that was, well, I don't know. Yeah, no, and it's been great because it takes something that has, that is so verbose, and can be so kind of mind-numbing when you're trying to read through it and figure out the logic and figure out if you have conditional rendering built directly into your UI there, and there's so many different other aspects that can end up getting kind of thrown on to your class component, that this streamlines everything removes a lot of the manipulation of objects and makes it very functional. So if there's something more people want to learn about, if you're into React, I'm sure we can figure out a way to make a longer talk about it, but that was a quick little intro. And essentially, yeah, the whole function now is from line 40 to line 76, so much shorter and has the same amount of functionality. Questions? Baseball. Did I miss anything with hooks?
Get up there.
Alright.
All that up.
Just wait.
You should add the ESLint plugin for React. Is it ESLint plugin React or like React hooks? That will automatically.
I don't have the hooks plugin yet.
It'll automatically add the dependencies for use effect into the last variable.
Really?
Yep. So if you forget them, it'll just add them in for you.
Oh, that's fancy.
I'll wait for it to line up.
It's the magic of the abstract syntax tree refactoring.
Yeah.
The use effects index with the array at the end of it, every time I write it, I put an empty array there. Because I'm always making an API call or something that I don't want it to do it again.
Yeah.
So API wise, I think that's a little janky. Janky for me. I'm like,
API calls like abstract out to your own
there's
code.
gotta be some better way to say, only run this once, please.
Yeah.
Not 3 times.
I mean, you can abstract it out to some kind of like maybe some kind of context layer or something that fires.
I
and
should write my
passes
own
that data
hook
back
that
in.
calls that hook, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, use my effect.
I'll affect you.
I heard you liked hooks, bro.
All right. Well.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. Yeah, thanks y'all for coming out.
Cool.
I think there's more pizza. Definitely more pizza. Grab some pizza. Maybe not any more beers since we have to drive from here, unless you're biking.
No, please drink the beer.
After biking, you might have to
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to end up like Chris, so maybe only a couple more beers before we bike.
Thanks for having me.
But yeah, no, thank you for doing this.